Hello, this is Slow Night, Ancient Tales, a time to soothe your weary day. Tonight, the story I will share with you is about the beautiful dream held deep within the heart of a great giant. He did not dream of a powerful nation that conquers the world with might, but of a country where the culture of love and peace blossoms. I hope your night is as peaceful and warm as this beautiful wish. Now, set aside the complex thoughts in your mind for a moment and gently close your eyes. Listen quietly to My Desire by Kim Ku, also known as Baekbeom. My desire, national state. If God asked me, "What is your desire?" I would answer without hesitation, "My desire is the independence of Korea." If he asked, "What is your next desire?" I would again say, "It is the independence of our country." And if he asked a third time, I would raise my voice even higher and answer, "My desire is the complete sovereign independence of our nation, Korea." My fellow countrymen, this is my one and only desire. I have lived my past 70 years for this wish. I live for it now, and I shall continue to live for it in the future. To one like me, who has endured 70 years of sorrow, shame, and agony as a person without a nation, the greatest thing in the world would be to live and die as a citizen of a completely independent and sovereign country. I once wished to be a gatekeeper of our independent government, meaning that if our country could only become independent, I would be content to be its lowliest servant. This is because the poverty of one's own independent nation is more joyful, honorable, and hopeful than the wealth and luxury found under the rule of another. I understand the sincerity of Baekbeom of old, who, when sent to Japan, declared, "I would rather be a dog or a pig of Gyerim than a subject of the King of Wa, enjoying riches." He rejected high office and great wealth offered by the King of Wa and accepted death because he wished rather to become a ghost of my own country. Recently, I hear there are some among our compatriots who desire to incorporate our country into a federation of a large neighboring nation. I find it hard to believe such words, but if such people truly exist, I can only see them as madmen who have lost their sanity. I have learned the ways of Confucius, Buddha, and Jesus, and I revere them as saints. Yet, even if there were a heaven or paradise established by them all together, if it were not a country established by our own nation, I would not lead our people into it. This is because a nation sharing the same blood and history is a distinct reality. Just as my body cannot become another's, this nation cannot become that nation. If two or more were to combine into one, the fundamental issue would be that one must be high and the other low, one commanding and the other obeying. Regarding this, some so-called leftists deny the fatherland of blood and speak of a fatherland of ideology. They ignore compatriots of the same blood and advocate for comrades of ideology and the international proletarian class, speaking as if nationalism is a concept that has fallen out of the realm of truth. This is a deeply foolish thought. Philosophies change, and political or economic theories are temporary, but the bloodline of a nation is permanent. There has never been a nation that has not, at some point, been split into 2 or 3 factions over religion, theory, or economic and political conflicts, fighting with blood. However, looking back, these are temporary events that pass like the wind. When the wind subsides, the nation remains like a forest, with roots and branches intertwined, living together. We must not forget that the so-called left and right of today are merely temporary waves rising in the eternal ocean of bloodlines. In this way, all ideologies go and faiths change. But the blood-tied nation remains on this earth as one body, entwined in the shared destiny of prosperity and decline. It would be a fine thing for all mankind to live as one household without distinction of yours and mine. It is the highest and ultimate hope and ideal of humanity. But this is something to be hoped for in the distant future, not a reality of the present. While it is right for humanity to strive toward the grand and beautiful goal of universal brotherhood, this too must not leave the realm of reality. The truth of reality is for each nation to form the best state and cultivate the best culture, then exchange with and help other nations. This is the democracy I believe in, and the most certain truth at the current stage of humanity. Therefore, the highest duty of our nation is, first, to establish a country of complete sovereign independence, neither regulated by nor dependent on others. Without this, we cannot guarantee the life of our nation, nor can we freely exert our national spirit to build a shining culture. After establishing such a country, the second duty is to give birth to a philosophy through which the humanity of this earth can enjoy true peace and happiness, and to realize it first in our own country. I know that the current culture of humanity is incomplete. Internally, every nation suffers from inequality and irrationality in politics, economy, and society. Externally, there is constant jealousy, friction, and aggression between nations and races, followed by wars of retaliation. Even after sacrificing immense life and wealth, things do not improve. Rather, anxiety and moral decay worsen. At this rate, wars will never end, and humanity will eventually perish. Therefore, the world now requires the discovery and practice of a new principle of life. I believe this is the sacred mission assigned to our nation. Thus, our independence is not merely a matter for 30 million people on 3,000 li of land, but truly a matter concerning the destiny of the entire world. Working for the independence of our country is, therefore, working for humanity. If we look at our current humble state and lose heart, doubting that the country we build can achieve such great things, we are insulting ourselves. It is not that our past history was not glorious, but that it was merely a prelude. It is from today onward that we step onto the stage of world history as lead actors. How can we think that our nation of 30 million cannot do what the ancient Greeks or Romans did? The work I desire for our nation is never to conquer the world by force or dominate it with economic power. It is only to live well ourselves and help all humanity live harmoniously and joyfully through a culture of love and peace. Do not call this a fantasy, because no nation has done it before. We should do it precisely because no one has done it yet. When we realize that this great task is what heaven has reserved for us, our nation will finally find its path and recognize its duty. I hope that all the young men and women of our country will cast aside small and narrow thoughts of the past, wake up to the great mission of our nation, and find joy in disciplining their minds and cultivating their strength. If the youth strive in this direction with this spirit, I am confident that within 30 years, our nation will be looked upon with entirely new eyes by the world. My political ideology, in one word, is liberty. The country we build must be a land of liberty. What is liberty? If liberty is defined as each individual living exactly as they please, that is something that exists either before a state is formed or after the state has withered away, as Lenin put it. For humanity living in a state, there is no such thing as unconditional liberty. This is because a state is a form of restraint through norms. What restrains us in national life is the law. Whether in a free country or an unfree one, individual life is restrained by the law. The difference between liberty and the lack thereof depends on where the law that restrains individual liberty comes from. The laws of a free country come from the free will of the people. The laws of an unfree country come from one individual or one class. That which comes from one individual is called autocracy or dictatorship. That which comes from one class is called class dictatorship, commonly known as fascism. I do not want our country to be a land of dictatorship. In a dictatorship, except for the class participating in power, all other citizens become slaves. The most terrifying of all dictatorships is a class dictatorship based on a certain ism or philosophy. A dictatorship by a monarch or individual ends once that individual is removed, but when a class organized of many individuals is the subject of dictatorship, it is extremely difficult to remove. Such a dictatorship is hard to break without a force greater than its own or international pressure. The Yangban politics of our country was also a form of class dictatorship, and it lasted for hundreds of years. Everyone knows the stories of the fascists in Italy and the Nazis in Germany. However, the most fearsome of all class dictatorships is one based on philosophy. The class dictatorship that reigned in Joseon for hundreds of years was based on the philosophy of Confucianism, specifically the Neo-Confucian school. It was a dictatorship that dictated not only politics but also thought, scholarship, social life, family life, and individual life. Under this dictatorship, our national culture vanished and our vitality was eroded. Because no scholarship other than Neo-Confucianism could develop, this influence extended to art, economy, and industry. The primary reason our country fell and our national strength withered was truly here. For no matter how good an idea or plan arose in the minds of the people, if the person was not of the ruling class, or if it fell outside the category of heresy, samun and joke, it could not be presented to the world. Because of this, how many new ideas were crushed before they could sprout, and how many plans were trampled before they could grow? I cannot help but feel deeply how important the freedom of speech is. Only in a country with freedom of speech is there progress. The so-called Soviet-style democracy, advocated by the Communist Party today, is the most thorough of such dictatorships, exhibiting all the characteristics of dictatorship to the extreme. They believe in the dialectic inherited from Hegel, the materialism of Feuerbach, and the theories of Marx, with Adam Smith's labor theory of value added as the final truth. They gather the power of the party, law, army, and police to strictly forbid even the slightest criticism, let alone opposition, to Marx's doctrine, meeting violators with deadly purges. This is beyond even what was done to heretics in old Joseon. If such politics were to spread across the world, all human thought might be unified under Marxism. But even if so unified, if that theory unfortunately proves to be wrong, there would be no greater tragedy for humanity. And has it not already been made known through the critique of many scholars that Hegel's dialectic, the foundation of Marx's doctrine, is not a universal truth? It is clear from the theories of scientists like Newton and Einstein that the changes in the natural world do not follow the dialectic. Therefore, to bind the thoughts of the people to a single doctrine is as wrong as forcing a national religion upon them. A mountain does not grow only one kind of tree, and a field does not bloom with only one kind of flower. In the country we build, Confucianism, Buddhism, and Christianity should all flourish freely. As for philosophy, all the great thoughts of humanity should come in, bloom, and bear fruit. Only then can it be called a land of liberty. In such a land of liberty, the greatest and highest culture of humanity will arise. I am not one who believes literally in the non-action, wu-wei of Lao Tzu, but I believe it is wrong to apply too much artificiality to politics. Since humans cannot be omniscient and omnipotent, and theories cannot be perfect, controlling the people with one person's thought or one doctrine may seem to show rapid progress temporarily, but it will eventually fall ill and invite a dialectical, violent revolution. Since all living things have an instinct to preserve themselves by adapting to their environment, the best way is to leave them be. Constant meddling with small schemes does more harm than good. Fine-grained interference in individual life, is never good governance. Citizens are neither soldiers in an army nor prisoners in a jail. That leading them by the command of one or a few is extremely unnatural and dangerous has been unfortunately proven by fascist Italy and Nazi Germany. Compared to these dictatorships, the United States may seem weakly unified and slow in progress, but looking at the results, it exerts the greatest power. This is the effect of democratic politics. When discussing a matter, at first, the people may seem to be in chaos as they voice their individual opinions, but through heated debate, opinions are gradually organized into a few large camps. Then, through the method of majority rule, a conclusion is reached in Parliament, and with the executive's approval, a law is formed. At this point, the will of the people is determined and becomes unshakable. In this sense, democracy is a procedure or method for identifying the people's will, not the content itself. That is, freedom of speech, freedom of voting, and submission to the majority. These three are democracy. The content of the national opinion is determined by the verbal battles of the people at that time. It is not dictated by the specific philosophical theory of any individual or party. This is the characteristic of American-style democracy. In other words, as long as the procedures of speech, voting, and majority rule are followed, laws and policies based on any philosophy can be made, limited only by the provisions of the Constitution. And even the Constitution is not sacrosanct like that of a dictatorship. It can be amended through democratic procedures. This is why the people, Min, are called the sovereigns, Jew of the state. To move the national opinion in such a country, one does not move a specific individual or party, but the opinion of the nation's people. While the small opinions of the people are determined by interests, their great opinions are determined by national character, faith, and philosophy. Herein lies the importance of culture and education. Preserving or improving national character is the power of culture and education, for even the direction of industry is determined by them. Education does not merely mean teaching the techniques of living. The foundation of education is the philosophy regarding the universe, life, and politics. Teaching the techniques of living upon a certain philosophical foundation is national education. Therefore, good democratic politics will begin with good education. Education in knowledge and technology that does not stand on a healthy philosophical foundation is harmful to the individual and the state. This is true for all of humanity. From what I have said, my political ideology can be roughly grasped. I reject dictatorship in any form. I cry out to my compatriots, be careful that we never become a dictatorship. Let us build a country where each individual enjoys tenfold freedom of speech, so the government follows the opinion of the entire people. A country where no party or class forces its philosophy on the majority, and where our current theories do not bind the freedom of thought and faith of our descendants. A country as wide and free as heaven and earth, yet where the virtue of love and the order of law are observed like the laws of nature. That is the country I want us to build. This does not mean I want to transcribe the American democratic system literally. I have simply compared American-style democracy based on freedom of speech against Soviet-style dictatorship to judge their value. If I must choose between the two, I take the one based on freedom of thought and speech. I do not think the American democratic system is necessarily final or perfect. As in any part of life, there will be infinite creative evolution in political forms. However, a country like ours, which has experienced various national forms over 5,000 years, may have many flaws but also clever political systems. Even looking at the Joseon dynasty, institutions like Hongmengwon, Saganwon, and Sahaeonbu were wonderful systems for reflecting the opinions of the wise in national affairs. The civil service examinations and the secret royal inspectors, Amhang-eosa, are also worth studying. I believe there are many useful things if we examine the political systems of our history. Taking the good things from other countries and choosing the good things from our own to create a unique and good system for Korea is also a contribution to world civilization. The country I desire. I want our country to be the most beautiful country in the world. I do not want it to be the most wealthy and powerful. Since I have felt the pain of being invaded by others, I do not want my country to invade others. It is enough if our wealth is sufficient for us to live abundantly, and our strength is sufficient to repel the invasions of others. The only thing I desire to have without limit is the power of a high culture. This is because the power of culture makes us happy ourselves, and in turn, gives happiness to others. What humanity lacks today is not military force or economic power. While natural science can never be too abundant, humanity already has enough science to live comfortably. The fundamental reason humanity is unhappy today is a lack of benevolence, mercy, and love. If this spirit is cultivated, the current material power would be enough for 2 billion people to live in peace. It is only culture that can cultivate this spirit in humanity. I do not want our country to be a nation that merely imitates others. I want it to be the source, the goal, and the model of this high and new culture. I want true world peace to be realized in and through our country. I believe this was the ideal of our national founder, Hongik Ingen, to broadly benefit the human world. Moreover, I believe our nation's talent, spirit, and past discipline are sufficient to achieve this mission. Our geographical location and conditions are suited for it. The needs of humanity after the First and Second World Wars demand it, and the timing of us rebuilding our nation in this era is right. Is the day when our nation appears on the world stage as a lead actor not visible before our eyes. To do this, what we must do is establish a political form that secures freedom of thought and perfect our national education. This is why I emphasized liberty in the state and spoke of the importance of education. The mission of building the highest culture, in a word, lies in making everyone a person of virtue, a saint. A person of Korea should be trusted and respected wherever they go. While our enemies were suppressing us, we cultivated a spirit of fierce struggle and hatred, but the enemy has retreated. Now is the time to cast away the struggle of hatred and work on the construction of harmony. A house divided falls, and a nation divided by internal strife falls. Hatred and struggle among compatriots is a sign of ruin. Our faces must shine with a peaceful spirit. Within our land, a warm spring breeze should always blow. This can be achieved by each citizen changing their mindset, and it will be sustained by the education of such a spirit. Each member of our nation, charged with the mission of becoming a model for humanity through the highest culture, must not be a selfish individualist. We must claim individual liberty to the extreme, but it is not a liberty used to fill one's own belly like beasts. It is a liberty used to make one's family, neighbors, and people live well. It is not the liberty to pluck flowers in a park, but the liberty to plant flowers in the park. We are not people who take from others or live off their favors. We find joy in giving to our family, neighbors, and compatriots. We are what our language calls seonbi, decent and honorable people. Therefore, we are not lazy but diligent. A father who loves his wife and children cannot help but be diligent. It is because he wishes to give without limit. I step forward to do the hard work because I cherish my beloved compatriots, and I offer the joyful things to others because I love them. This is the inhu jideok, virtue of benevolence and thickness, that our ancestors loved. Through this, the mountains of our country will be lush with forests, the fields will overflow with grains and fruits, and the villages and cities will be clean, abundant, and peaceful. Thus our compatriots, the people of Korea, both men and women, will always have a peaceful glow on their faces and emit the fragrance of virtue from their bodies. Such a country cannot be unhappy even if it tries, and it cannot perish even if it tries. National happiness never comes from class struggle, nor does individual happiness come from selfishness. Class struggle gives birth to endless class struggle, leaving the land soaked in blood. If I harm others out of selfishness, the world will harm me out of selfishness. This is a law where one gains little and loses much. The retaliation Japan suffered this time is the best practical example proving this on an international and national level. What I have said above is a sketch of the appearance of the new country I hope for. Fellow countrymen, how wonderful would it be if such a country were to be? How satisfied would we be to leave our descendants in such a country? In the past, Jija of the Han lands longed for our country and came here. Even Confucius wished to come to where our nation lived, calling us a people who love benevolence. It was so in the past, and shall we not make all humanity long for our nation's culture in the future? I believe that through our strength, and especially through the power of education, this will surely be achieved. If the young men and women of our country all hold this heart, how can it not be accomplished? I too once engaged in education in Hwanghae province, and this was what I hoped for through education. Now that I am over 70, I do not have much time left to directly engage in national education, but I cannot help but pray that the educators and students of the world will once greatly change their hearts. 1947, outside Seimun. Warm smiles will spread across our faces, and the fragrance of virtue will quietly bloom in our hearts. Tonight, I hope a warm spring breeze fills your dreams as well. Holding on to that generous heart that dreamed of beautiful peace, we now fall into a deep and comfortable sleep, a story of falling asleep on a slow night. Tonight, too, I will pray for you. Sweet dreams. Good night.